A stranger with shaking hands in a hospice hallway said 4 words that changed his life. "Go home tonight, son." He listened. And what he walked into in his own house, at midnight, his mother and his brother and his aunt, is the kind of betrayal that doesn't fully register the first time you hear it. Marcus built his logistics company in Seattle the old-fashioned way. One truck, one rented warehouse on the south side of the city. 16 hard days, 7 days a week, for almost a decade. By the time he was 40, that company was moving freight contracts worth 8 figures a year. He didn't spend the money on himself. He paid off his mother's house in Bellevue outright, no mortgage. He bought his brother Ethan a truck so he'd always have reliable transportation. He gave his Aunt Linda a salaried bookkeeping position inside his own company because she was family, and family meant something to him. Here's what that actually cost him, and this is the part that matters. Linda had access to the company accounts. Not just read access, full access. Wire transfer authority, vendor payment approval. The kind of access you only give to someone you would trust with your life. Marcus gave it to her without a second thought. That was the door they walked through. But Marcus didn't know any of that yet, because for the past several months, the only thing on his mind was his little sister Sophie. Sophie had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, the kind where the doctors stop talking about treatment and start talking about comfort. Marcus spent nearly every evening at the hospice facility in Tacoma, sitting in the chair beside her bed while the hallway lights dimmed and the world outside went quiet. He thought he was there to take care of her. He had no idea she was the one running out of time trying to take care of him. One rainy Thursday night in November, Marcus was sitting in the hallway outside Sophie's room. His coffee had been cold for 2 hours. His eyes were heavy. Across the hall was an elderly man named Walter. He'd been a patient there for weeks, barely said a word to anyone. Just sat near his window each day and stared out at the parking lot, still and quiet, like a man who had already made peace with most things. That night, Walter walked over. He lowered himself into the chair beside Marcus, slowly, the way old men move when every joint costs something. His hands were shaking. "Son," he said, barely above a whisper, "if it's at all possible, go home tonight." Marcus looked at him. "I'm sorry." Walter's eyes moved toward Sophie's door. He didn't explain. He just said, "Trust me." It wasn't the words that stayed with Marcus. It was the look on his face, not the fear of a man worried about himself, the fear of a man who knows something is happening to someone else and is running out of time to say it. A nurse appeared 30 seconds later and wheeled Walter back to his room. The whole thing, start to finish, lasted less than half a minute. Marcus sat with it for 2 hours. Then he got up, walked to his car, and drove home to his house in the Ravenna neighborhood. Dark windows, porch light off, everything normal. He came in through the back door, and then he heard voices. His family, his mother, Ethan, Aunt Linda, all 3 of them in his dining room at midnight. They thought he was still at hospice. Marcus didn't move. He stood in the shadow of the kitchen doorway and listened. Then he heard his own name. "Once Sophie dies, Marcus gets everything," Ethan said. Marcus's stomach dropped straight through the floor. Linda laughed, not a nervous laugh, a comfortable one, the laugh of someone who has already decided the outcome. Not if the paperwork is finalized first. Papers slid across the table. Then Marcus's mother spoke. "And this is the line that still doesn't feel real when you hear it," she said. "The poor fool won't even know what happened." Marcus reached into his pocket and started recording. What he heard over the next 20 minutes was this. Linda had spent the past 14 months quietly draining his company. Shell businesses set up under names he'd never seen. Vendor accounts that didn't exist. Wire transfers routed through Nevada, then Georgia, then offshore. Patient, systematic, invisible. Nearly $3 million gone. The plan was to use Sophie's death as a smokescreen. Let Marcus grieve. Let the paperwork pile up. Give the transfers time to fully disappear before anyone looked closely at the books. It was well thought out. But then Ethan said something that made every other thought disappear. What about the other secret? The room went quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Linda looked at Marcus's mother. His mother's voice dropped so low Marcus almost missed it. Marcus can never find out the truth about Sophie. He waited another 20 minutes. Nobody explained what they meant. He walked out the same way he came in, silent. He drove back to Tacoma and sat in the hospice parking lot and watched the sun come up. In the morning, he found Walter by his window. This time Marcus wasn't gentle about it. Walter reached into his coat and handed him a folded photograph. Marcus opened it and stopped. The photo showed Walter standing next to Marcus's father. His father had been dead for 20 years, Walter explained. He and Marcus's father had been business partners in the early 90s. Before his death, Marcus's father had discovered serious financial dishonesty inside the extended family, not from Marcus's immediate household, but from people close to it. He'd hired private investigators. Walter was part of that process. "What does that have to do with anything happening right now?" Marcus asked. Walter looked toward Sophie's room. "Because Sophie called me 3 months ago." Marcus went still. "She found out what was happening to your company," Walter said. "She'd been tracking it, building a record. She reached out to me because she knew I had history with your father, and she needed someone she could trust outside the family." And then it all connected. The late-night phone calls Sophie would take in the hallway. The laptop she'd close quietly when Marcus walked in. The way she'd sometimes look at him, not like a sick person looking at her brother, but like someone carrying something heavy that she wasn't ready to put down yet. She knew everything. She had known for months, and she had spent her final weeks doing something about it. But Walter wasn't done. "There's one more thing," he said. Marcus stayed very still. Walter told him about the estate. When Marcus's father rewrote his final documents before he died, he didn't leave control of his hidden assets to Marcus. He didn't leave it to Ethan. He left it to Sophie, a set of family assets held in a private trust, worth just under $20 million. With one condition: they could only be released with Sophie's personal written approval. She never gave it. Not once. That's why the family needed her gone, not out of grief. Not because of anything she had done to them. Because as long as Sophie was alive and mentally sound, no one could touch a single dollar of that trust. Think about that for a second. While Marcus sat beside her bed every night holding her hand, while he rearranged his entire life to be there for her, they were in his dining room, at his table, eating food from his kitchen, counting down the days until she died, so they could finally take what they'd been waiting for. They used his love for his sister as a distraction. If this story is doing what I think it's doing right now, share it, send it to someone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what Sophie did next is the part of this story that stays with you. 2 days later, Sophie passed away. Marcus was holding her hand. When the room cleared, a hospice nurse quietly approached him and handed him a sealed envelope. Sophie had left it with the staff weeks earlier. Instructions said Marcus only. He opened it in his car. Inside were 14 months of account records. Emails between Linda and the shell company managers using company devices on company time. Signed wire transfer authorizations in Linda's handwriting. Property records for assets purchased using stolen funds. And a handwritten note from Sophie, 7 pages, naming every person involved, every amount, every date, in order. She hadn't just gathered evidence, she had assembled a prosecution. Marcus didn't confront anyone, didn't call Ethan, didn't walk into Linda's office, didn't send a single angry text. He called a forensic accountant on a Monday morning. He called a federal financial crimes attorney that afternoon. Then he went home, made coffee, and let the process do what the process does. Federal investigators are patient people. They move through every account, every LLC, every property deed, quietly, methodically, over several months, the way investigators do when the evidence is clean and the case is airtight. Linda was charged with federal financial fraud. 3 counts. The kind of charges that don't resolve with a fine. Ethan lost the truck Marcus had bought him. Lost the apartment Marcus had co-signed. Lost every asset that could be tied to money that wasn't his, which turned out to be most of what he had. Property seized, accounts frozen. business fraud, charges attached to anyone whose signature appeared on the right documents. Even Marcus's mother faced legal consequences, not as the person who designed it, but as someone who sat at that table and said what she said while a recorder was running. The family that had spent years treating Marcus like a funding source, rather than a person, collapsed under the weight of their own paperwork. Marcus never had to raise his voice once. Sophie's evidence did every single thing. A year later, Marcus drove back to Tacoma. Walter was still there near his window. When he saw Marcus walk in, he smiled, the slow, satisfied smile of a man who had been waiting to see how it ended. "You got justice," he said. Marcus nodded. But justice wasn't what stayed with him. What stayed was something smaller and harder to explain. The realization that on all those nights he sat beside Sophie's bed, thinking he was there for her. She was awake in the dark doing the work. She was going through documents on a laptop she'd close whenever he walked in. She was writing 7 pages by hand for a brother she knew would need them. She was protecting him with the only thing she had left: time and what she chose to do with it. He thought he was watching over her. She was the one watching over him. The company is whole now. The trust is exactly where Sophie left it, untouched, exactly as her father intended. The people who tried to take it are gone. And somewhere in a hospice hallway in Tacoma, an old man with shaking hands told a tired son to go home. That 30-second conversation changed the outcome of everything. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person, one moment, one choice to say something when silence would have been easier. Walter made that choice, Sophie made it too, and in the end it was enough. The long game always wins.